Here's one of those articles. You have to be careful when you speak to the press, especially when you run a business. Let's see. The cafe has Black Lives Matter signs. The owner voted for Trump. So where are we going with this? I'm a liberal guy, said Thomas Bosco, who was facing backlash after he said in an MSNBC interview that he voted for the president in 2016 and was likely to do so again. Okay. And there's a picture of him here. Black Lives Matter right there. Thomas Bosco runs Indian Road Cafe in Inwood. Inwood is a neighborhood in northern Manhattan, for those who may not be aware. It's like all the way up, at, close to the very tip of Manhattan, like right before you head over to the Bronx, if you look at the map of Manhattan. It's not like Midtown with all these fancy buildings and expensive rent. Regular neighborhood, regular people, working class people. But I think they've been gentrifying now. People have been moving up there. Uh, so the neighborhood is probably changing more than likely. He said his comments, which were published on MSNBC website, were presented without context. So let's see. At Indian Road Cafe, at Indian Road Cafe in Upper Manhattan, a Black Lives Matter sign hangs in a front window. Local writers, artists, musicians, and political activists are regulars. And for years, two drag queens have hosted a monthly charity bingo tournament there. Many in the surrounding Inwood neighborhood considered it a community hub and a progressive oasis. So this is more than a place where you eat, you know? It's like there's a connection here. See? They consider it a progressive oasis. But then the cafe's owner, Thomas Bosco, said in an MSNBC interview in late spring that he voted for President Trump in 2016 and was likely to do so again. The backlash was swift, as you might expect. Neighbors railed in the comments on various neighborhood Facebook groups, posting hundreds of angry messages aimed at the cafe and one another. Some people called for a boycott. How could I be against Trump and all that he stands for and go somewhere and patronize someone who supports this demon? Douglas Henderson, 62, a lawyer and nearby resident, said in an interview. Glennis Aquino Gill, 37, a resident of Riverdale in the Bronx, vowed she would never go to Indian Road again. Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, who lives nearby, wrote on Facebook, "It is hard to ever go back. The two drag queens have said they will move their show to a different venue." Wow, so this guy is losing business now. The controversy coming in the middle of a pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests show how, in a highly polarized social media era, a few comments in an interview can reverberate. Mr. Bosco said the fallout from his TV appearance in a segment about small business owners and workers might put him out of business. Isn't that something? You know, I mean, here you are in Manhattan, one of the most liberal cities in the world. And you owning up to voting for Trump. Okay, you voted for Trump, fine. But then you're saying you're gonna vote for him again in 2020. See? That's the mistake right there. I mean, it's one thing to say you voted for him in 2016, and maybe you made a mistake, but you're going to vote for him again after everything this man is doing, trying to destroy America, trying to take away the liberty, believing he's King Trump, where the law doesn't apply to him, goes to court, obstructs Congress, everything, firing all these different people, whether inspector generals. I've never seen such crazy stuff. Constantly firing people, as if he's on that TV show. Soon after the TV appearance circulated online, Mr. Bosco posted an open letter to the community. The community I live in, a community I love, respect, and serve, defending his answer to the question about Mr. Trump's response to the coronavirus pandemic. In the appearance, Mr. Bosco said that the president had made missteps, but at the end of the day, I support him. I support my governor and I support my mayor. Mr. Bosco then said he voted for Mr. Trump in 2016 and planned to do so again. In his open letter, Mr. Bosco wrote that he had answered honestly and from the heart, but his response had been presented without context. Well, what context do you need? I mean, really, you know? People are looking at how Trump is behaving, always on Twitter, 3 o'clock in the morning. We used to always believe that the President of the United States is probably the most busiest person in the world. But this man disproves that. Shows that the President of the United States has a lot of time in his hand to be tweeting all kinds of crazy stuff at 2 in the morning, making threats, pulling out of the World Health Organization in the middle of a pandemic, and you're going to vote for somebody like that again? I mean, really. Pulling out of the World Health Organization, which deals with pandemics, in the middle of a pandemic that's going on, that's killing people, that has killed over 130,000 Americans so far, and people around the world, and people losing their jobs, their livelihoods, their businesses. A man who seems to have, no empathy for anybody except himself, always a victim. It's like somebody's always doing something bad to him. Mm? So let's get on with this. So then he says here, he said that was individual did not include that he had supported the last 4 presidents and that he had found many things troubling about our administration. I am a liberal guy who supports almost every liberal cause I can think of, Mr. Bosco said recently while sitting inside his cafe, empty because of the current ban on indoor dining. When a worker did not have childcare, Mr. Bosco provided it on site. Mr. Bosco and another employee said. They also said that when a different worker feared being stopped by the police and questioned about his immigration status, Mr. Bosco drove that person to and from the cafe. And on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, Mr. Bosco organized a brunch to raise money for an immigrant advocacy organization. He struggled to explain how he voted for Mr. Trump in 2016 after having supported Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, a progressive Democrat, early that year. Eventually, he settled on the phrase small government, big community. Well, that wouldn't be true because if Bernie Sanders has his way and Medicare for all, that will that's the opposite of small government. That will make it big government because the government is controlling Medicare for all, which is a huge industry, you know, meaning spending trillions of dollars um, on healthcare. So that doesn't even make any sense right there to say he settled on the phrase small government, big community. No, that's the opposite of Bernie Sanders. Now, Mr. Bosco said he's not sure whom he will support in November. Oh, he did say he was going to vote for Trump, but he's not sure whom he's going to support. Well, I don't think people really care at this point. My staff feels like I let them down to a certain extent, Mr. Bosco said. They feel like when I answered the question that I didn't think about them as employees of the cafe he was represented, he added. And that hurts. I wish I had it back. And there's the Indian Road Cafe right there. The, the cafe has plans to change its name to Inwood Farm this month. Similar backlashes have erupted in liberal New York City, usually after a business is revealed to have financial links to Mr. Trump or socially conservative causes. Last year, the management at a high-end fitness chains Equinox and Soul Cycle faced a blowback from a member after it was reported that the outlets were financially linked to Stephen Ross, a real estate developer who planned to host a fundraiser in the Hamptons for Mr. Trump. But Mr. Bosco is no Mr. Ross. Mr. Bosco has not made donations to any political campaign according to the city, state, and federal records online. And Indian Road is not a chain. Does he know where his restaurant is? Asked Caroline Montero, 29, from nearby Washington Heights. The cafe, which will change its name to Inwood Farm this month, is in a gentrifying area with many immigrants. Where's your loyalty? She added, as she sat in a park across the street from the cafe with Miss Aquino Gill and another friend, sipping drinks purchased from a park vendor. All three vowed to no longer patronize the cafe. See? So he lost three people right there in business. Vivian Yordra, 49, of Inwood, was one of the first to post Mr. Bosco's interview in the neighborhood Facebook group. She said that what he had done locally paled in comparison to how he had voted. He broke the trust with the community, she said. I appreciate that he's given money to immigrant rights groups and donated to food pantries, Miss Lodra said in an interview. That's great, but it doesn't take away the fact that he voted for someone in 2016 and planned to vote for someone in 2020 who will take away my rights. So Facebook users have posted hundreds of angry messages aimed at the cafe. Hawk Newsom, chairman of an independent Black Lives Matter group in Manhattan, said, I wouldn't say there is no coming back from supporting Donald Trump, but it is a very long road to redemption. On a recent sunny afternoon, customers sat at small tables under the cafe's awning. There is no controversy with me, said Jason Claiborne, 43, a creative director for a publishing company and a longtime Inwood resident. If he is a racist, right-wing supremacist, he's hiding it so goddamn good, Mr. Claiborne said. He was later joined by a friend, Andrea Wallace, a former mayor of Mount Vernon, which lies just north of the city. Patronizing the cafe, Mr. Wallace said, had nothing to do with the cafe owner's vote in the presidential race. I don't see why I would mix the two, said Mr. Wallace, 52, a Democrat. So see, you have to be careful. You have a business in a place like Inwood, a place where you have lots of artists and progressive people who really can't stand Trump and think, and I mean, not too far from Inwood is where Trump Tower is, and people who live here in New York know Trump. I mean, people in the rest of America don't really know Trump except when they saw him in that TV show, the TV show that he had where he used to fire people. The Apprentice, that's the name of it. But if you live here in New York and you grew up in New York, then you know about Trump. You know about him, and you know that he was a media whore. He was somebody who loved using the media, loved being in the news. He loved that kind of stuff. Always wanted to be in the media. Many years ago, when I was out of college, I worked in a hotel in Manhattan, not too far from Central Park. And in that hotel, there were some people that were famous, some people you never heard of. And there was one particular person. I remember one time he was in the newspaper. He was a very famous person. He was in the newspaper because he used to perform. He was an artist. And one of the persons who worked in the area, the Cockle area where he brings stuff in, they told him, they said, you're in the paper today. He didn't even know. He said, bring that paper for me, he told him. He had no idea he was in the paper. He wanted to read what they were saying about him and so forth. And in those days, he gave him like $5 for the newspaper. In those days, I think the newspaper probably was like maybe 25 cents, 30 cents. He gave him like $5 tip. So my point is, here was a famous man, a famous American, who had no idea he was even in the newspaper. And that's how some people famous were. They in the newspaper, they don't even know, unless maybe an agent or somebody come to them and tell them, look, you're in the news. But Donald Trump always knew whether he was in the newspaper because he placed himself to be in the media, and that's the difference here. If you live in Manhattan and you claim to be rich and you claim to have money, well, you know what? There are a lot of other rich people who live in Manhattan too. So how do you stand out? If you love publicity, how do you stand out? When this other guy is rich, that other guy is rich, all the people around you are rich. Well, the way you stand out is by making news about yourself. Calling into TV stations or page 6 of the New York Post, coming up with stories, pretending you're an agent, and all this stuff, and giving gossip. And that's that's how Donald Trump used the press. He was a media whore, and now when you look at him and he says things like the media, the enemy of the people. That's laughable, because he used the media to make himself. And like I said, you have rich people who were in the news. They didn't even know they're in the news, until you tell them, look, there's a picture of you here, There's a picture of you here in the news, and oh my golly, that's me. Wow, let me pay for that newspaper. Yeah, it's $5. No, Donald Trump always knew when he was in the news, because he made sure that he was in the news, and he made sure that everybody knew.